It all started because people can't pay back money on their mortgages, so is our fault for living beyond our means? Perhaps is that all part of it? Joining now from our central London studio, Richard Sorsky of UK Insolvency Helpline and Donna Bradshaw of IFG Financial Services. Thank you both for agreeing to talk about this one. Richard, are people's eyes bigger than their wallets? Have we forgotten how to defer gratification these days?
Well, I think so. I mean, we're pretty much at the forefront of free money advice, and we're seeing probably record numbers of people calling our service, probably about 2,000 or 3,000 a day at the moment, clogging up the phone lines. And what the main problem we're finding at the moment is repossessions and credit card debts. Obviously, repossessions have been in the news a lot recently. The banks, we're finding, are lending people more money they can afford on houses that they can't afford, on overpriced houses, and the loans are all interest only, so there is actually a question mark on whether the actual lender can even pay back the loan.
I suppose, Donna, there'll be people looking at the story today, well, it's not just today, it's been for the last week or so, about a global credit crunch, wondering how this can affect them, thinking it's going to probably affect big city financiers and their bonuses, but it does affect them, doesn't it, in the form of their pensions and, crucially, their mortgages.
In one basket, so it's not all in equities. And I think we do get a bit overexcited. I do believe that the markets will correct themselves, and I think that may be a good thing because there's been a lot of hubris around, and there has been some bad practice. In America in particular, they've been lending money to people who quite clearly couldn't afford to repay those mortgages the way they did at the end of the 80s and early 90s.
A bitter dose of reality, Richard, for people recognising perhaps, say for instance with the housing market, that it's not always a one-way street.
Well, that's an interesting view. I mean, Donna's obviously from a slightly different viewpoint than myself. She's talking more on a macro point of view, but on a micro point of view, things are pretty desperate. The UK Insolvency Helpline is seeing people with huge credit card debts and mortgage debts, and something's got to be done. And what I can see, what I've identified, is there's a wave of liquidity through the UK at the moment, and it's being fueled by the desire from companies offering credit. And unfortunately, you know, the world is a profit-making world, but the losers are the consumers.
I think there are certain people in society who just prefer to spend, and they need to learn good practices. And perhaps the banks do need to take some responsibility there and actually lend, be far more careful in who they lend to in future.
That's an interesting point you've raised there, Donna, but I probably have to disagree. The UK Insolvency Helpline represents the nurses, the key workers, the cleaners, the teachers on low incomes, and you're saying it's their fault they're in debt. Well, unfortunately, when we're seeing divorces at a very high rate, unemployment, illness, incapacity benefit, it's these drop in incomes, it's these unforeseen events that we're seeing.
But Richard, aren't you in danger of turning everybody into a victim there? There has to be surely some personal responsibility. I mean, sure, people are going to be sympathetic if circumstances truly are extenuating, but very often it's pure good old-fashioned fecklessness.
I'm pleased you said that, and I'd like to raise the point, what came first, the lender or the spender? I only see things from the street level. I see the people crying on the phones, the people who are losing their homes and property. I'm not seeing businesses making profits. I'm seeing people in despair, and we've got to advise them on things like IVAs, individual voluntary arrangements, or bankruptcy or repossession. We don't see things from the viewpoint of banks saying, oh, we're trying to teach people. That's the main thing we do at the helpline, is budgeting. We provide very, very detailed income expenditure analysis, and we try and make sure people do save, but it's very difficult for key workers and low-paid people, very, very difficult to save. People are stretched.
But that's a separate issue. But even with those individuals,
Donna,
again, go back to people need to learn to manage their savings.
We have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Donna and Richard, thank you both very much indeed for your thoughts.